Hello, romance lovers. Today I have a story for you called Living Again as a Maid. Don't forget to support this video with a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new interesting stories. Thank you. The old woman lies peacefully, her eyes closed. She has been in a better world for a long time and in complete peace, probably enjoying her stay there. The rest of the people in the hall are called to say goodbye to the deceased. The crowd of people seemed to be in complete darkness. The sun was shining brightly outside, but their sadness darkened all possible colors around them. Some were crying, and from this, light sobs and the sounds of falling. The little boy, finally breaking away, gently tugs at his mother's skirt, trying to attract her attention to his person. The only question that comes out of his mouth is that he thinks the lady, trying not to cry in front of her son so as not to show herself weak, tries to swallow her sadness and smiles easily. Granny went to rest in a beautiful place, and it was destined to be. The girl is sure. The boy keeps asking questions. The only thing that interests him at this age is goodies. The most interesting thing is whether there is something in that place that he would like to see. The lady smoothly squats down and gently hugs her son. Uncontrollable tears flow down the face on their own. A hand falls on the baby's head, trying to subconsciously calm the child, knowing that it will be better this way. They should see Grandma off with smiles on their face. Someone's hand falls on the bed and begins to shake the feather bed intensely. There is complete silence in the room, but everything ends very quickly. The owner of the female voice begins to say that it is time for her interlock. The girl doesn't understand who is so desperately looking for her grandmother. Perhaps it is her granddaughter Scion, but in order to understand what is happening, she needs to open her eyes. Only the outline, fully open eyes show reality. Right next to the bed stands a lady in a maid's uniform. An angry expression on her face makes it clear that something is already going wrong. Granny doesn't know this person at all. Not a second passes before the dark-haired girl switches from disgruntled remarks to a sharp scream, accusing the girl of sleeping like a log. This is indeed true, and sometimes it is difficult to wake her. It seems that the interlocutor is increasingly running out of patience. "How can you not get up for so long when you have to go to work?" she says. The cute maid's uniform lay right in front of her, as if looking at the girl. She didn't understand how she was here. Something was definitely wrong here, and she needed to find out. The main character was pulled out of her thoughts by her interlocutor, who had been talking about something all this time. Lifting the girl from the bed, she says that the dark-haired lady wanted to complain about her joints, which usually ached mercilessly when moving quickly, but it was not to be. She caught herself thinking that the pain. It was as if Grandma was simply in a completely different body. Nothing felt real anymore. She only had to close her eyes and she wouldn't have to think about anything. The beauty with short, dark hair looked at the reflection. Black, large like a fawn's, eyes, a young face, and soft features proved once again that the girl was no longer in her body. Shock and confusion showed in the young lady's eyes. Horror came up, trying to take over her consciousness, and the girl put her hands to her face. This was simply impossible. This could not happen. For the second time that day, the girl is pulled out of her thoughts by the same maid. The screams seemed to drown out her ears, preventing her from thinking about anything else. She should move faster, and finally, walking down the corridor, the heroine still didn't understand what was happening. She was now dressed in different clothes, working in someone's estate, and the most important thing was that she had changed. The stairs really do look very dirty. Dust literally lies in clumps on the steps. The girl can't imagine how the people living here could have let the castle get to such a state. As she approached the fork, the girl realized that no one had told her which staircase she should clean. There were several of them, and the prospect of cleaning the entire space did not please her at all. It is very difficult to find out the truth, because there is no one nearby who could tell. It is even more difficult to simply decide without any advice. The girl is at a complete dead end. It's time to show off your skills. It's much easier to just remove both ladders instead of looking for someone and asking what exactly Hammy should do. The mop is quickly in his hands, and a mischievous smile appears on his mischievous face. The first in line was the carpet. A beautiful scarlet color that definitely attracts attention, but collects too much dust and dirt. The red carpet is lifted, revealing a hidden surprise. A whole bunch of some fine dirt. The girl's face wrinkles. She clearly wanted to sneeze, but holding herself back was much more important. The heroine did not expect that everything would turn out this way. Next in line is the stairs. Water and detergents will help a lot, because in this case, it will be quick and easy to wash everything. The wet rag starts working intensively, wiping the step. Once everything is finished, attention switches to the hall the girl is in. It seems she still has some free time, which means she can manage to clean up even here. You can see how everything around you slowly starts to literally shine with cleanliness. Hammy is actively working with a mop, humming some incoherent melody from her past life under her breath. A beautiful antique fireplace also requires a good cleaning. The item is decorated with gold and therefore requires proper care to avoid darkening. The structure turns out to be quite tall. It would be more convenient to stand on some stool or chair, but there is nothing suitable nearby. How inconvenient it is to be short. The cleaning is finally coming to an end. Putting her hand to her face, as if wiping away sweat, the main character smiles happily. She is extremely pleased with herself, and nothing can change that. Now you can finally relax. After the first hard day at work, you just want to sit down. So the beauty gently lowers herself onto the bed, softening the landing with her hand. Sitting on the bed in her room, the girl is only now thinking about everything that is happening. She didn't have time while cleaning, but now her thoughts are becoming more and more confused. It is completely unclear what happened. Hammy thought that her life supply had run out and she was no longer there. There is some truth to that, but if that is true, where is she now? The gaze involuntarily falls on the small hands. No one knows, and no one will answer the question of who this girl is and how all this happened. She will have to remain in this body for an indefinite period. Perhaps with time, the girl will again become old and decrepit, just as she was before today. Confusion is trying to cover her head, not giving her a chance to get out, but it is worth controlling your actions. Reality was vaguely blurred. Nothing seemed real, and so a bunch of questions popped into my head, as if from nowhere. My eyes involuntarily darted around the room, looking for something to... The good thing was that now the 89-year-old woman would finally have a chance to rest. Even with the cleaning and even with all the responsibilities, the girl was sure that she would be able to find positives. A beautiful castle sparkles in the sun. It is a bright, warm spring day outside. The roofs sparkle from how well they are polished. The house is hosting one young lady covers her mouth with her hand and showers compliments on how nice and clean it is. Her companion chimes in, saying that Winston shouldn't be modest because the house really has been beautifully restored. The red-haired Duke doesn't understand what's going on. This mansion is over 100 years old, and even the maids refuse to clean it. And then someone gives him such a compliment. It was quite unexpected. One of the girls continues the theme of the beauty of the house, but this time she is talking about the chandelier. The thing is so sparkling clean that it seems like a brand new chandelier, even if it is not. The man is just surprised and silent. One of the chief servants approaches the owner without delay. A greeting escapes his lips. No answer follows because the Viscount cannot believe that he is in his own house. Approaching the elderly man, the Duke bows his head slightly and asks, expecting a clear answer. It turns out that this is all the work of the new maid who tried her best. The servant tells about a 15-year-old orphan girl he took in not long ago. Only a few days had passed, and she needed to get used to it. But today she showed a magnificent work. No one even... The Viscount smiles warmly, realizing that thanks to this girl, he managed to save face in front of the guests. The guy should thank this girl. All her efforts did not go unnoticed by the keen eye. Straightening his tie and hiding a smile, the Duke continued the conversation with his interlocutor. He asked that the lady be invited into his office as soon as the guests left. He had questions and good intentions, so it was worth waiting for. Hammy carefully entered the open office and stood in the middle of the room as if frozen in a silent question. She was interested in what had happened, But in front of her, she only saw a man she unexpectedly for herself, she nevertheless decided to ask why they were looking for her. It seemed that the girl had just made a mistake, addressing the guy in exactly that tone. But fortunately, the subordinate immediately runs up to the Viscount, trying to explain the situation. It seems that Hammy has not yet been taught basic etiquette, and that is why she started the conversation in the wrong. The girl should have been sent to the maid to learn manners, but that didn't happen. They decided that at least now it wasn't necessary, because the girl was here for something completely different. They called her to thank her. The young lady's eyes slowly widened. She didn't understand why she was being called a commoner, a servant, and an orphan. It was all too sudden. Hammy didn't know why she was here, why she had this particular fate, and she didn't know why she had this name, but none of that mattered. Even if she had ended up in any other, a young body full of vitality, together with an 89-year-old body full of common sense, seemed like a gift from fate. She was given the opportunity to live this life again the way she wanted. The girl was asked her name, asking if it was true that this was her name, to which she only nodded in agreement. I don't know if this name can really be used, but she had no choice. Putting his hand to his face, the guy continued his line. For everything the girl had done, he wanted to do something for her in return. It didn't matter what, because she could get whatever she wanted as a reward. Without even thinking for a minute, the maid quickly and incoherently mumbled something. She asked only for thread and fabric. The wish was strange and incomprehensible. Silence fell over the room. The girl understood that if they owned such an estate, then they would certainly not begrudge her some fabric. They did not ask for many things at once. She was quite determined, burning with not quite understanding the young lady's motives. The Viscount nodded in agreement. He promised that he would tell the maid and she would give everything separately, bringing it to the room. The only thing, joy instantly appeared on the beauty's face. She literally rejoiced at how she would be able to get everything she wanted. Lowering her voice, the girl says that this will be more than enough. The Duke decides to whisper. Addressing his servant, he talks about Hammy. She doesn't know life at all. She's only 15 years old. The order was to increase her salary so that she would have enough. The man now addresses the girl in a normal tone, saying that the maid will provide her with a supply of fabric and thread. This was more of a statement of fact, but the girl only bowed as a sign of respect and expressed the girl was really good at cleaning. It was one of her favorite things to do. She knew exactly how to do it, and so she was able to do all the necessary work without any difficulty. However, the best thing in this world is sewing. Once it was not only a hobby, but also a way to earn money. Literally, everyone around liked her work, and it was logical, because they could not help but. Since childhood, the girl studied and her skills grew, so that she became a real craftswoman. This could not but please, because now there was an opportunity to do everything that was possible. A set of beautiful multicolored threads and dark silk fabric lay in plain sight. It seems the request was heard, and now the main character has everything she needs to be happy. The box with accessories quickly appeared on the girl's lap. Her eyes curiously examined the things offered to her, just what could help to do the first work. The first thing that came to mind was that curtains and tablecloths in mansions do not go well together. Perhaps this is something she should take on. It would be a great honor for her to redo the next second, several girls in nightgowns surrounded Hammy. Questions rained down from all sides, but the most important of them was that they wanted to know why the girl went to the Viscount. It seemed that the interlocutors were completely incapable of waiting. Their eyes literally shone with impatience. Everyone wanted to know what the main character was awarded in the Duke's office. All the girls, as one, believed that Hammy had asked not only for fabric and threads, but also for some other, more material thing. Listening to all this, the beauty only closed her eyes and smiled kindly. One of the maids fell into a reverie, thinking about what she might ask for if she had the opportunity. Her first idea was the other dark-haired maid was a true lady. She needed an elegant hat and preferably a beautiful dark sea green, like all ladies. The blonde, closing her eyes, recalled her desire with pleasure. She really wanted to get gloves, so the girl would have asked for them. According to her, her hands did not look so nice without gloves. The beauties continued to argue about something while Hammy was lost in her thoughts. They were probably only 17 to 18 years old, and this was a great time for new desires, accomplishments, and everything else. One of the people present looked away, noticing something interesting. It wasn't clear what it was, but it seemed she finally understood. The beautiful embroidered dragon literally sparkled in its own light. Bright red color, massive teeth, and most importantly, all of this is embroidered from threads on fabric. The answer was a long prepared line. The girl saw today that the tablecloths and curtains were not quite suitable, so the solution to replace them turned out to be the best one. It was done really simply wonderfully. A second later, the door swung open. The dark-haired girl was indignant. She thought it was unacceptable to scream at night. Her face reflected rage, although the two women quickly began to bustle about. It was none other than Josephine, and if things went this way, she might complain about them. They all had to get back to bed quickly. The maid stood in the middle of the room in absolute silence. The girl, sitting on the bed, also did not dare to say a word, fearing the consequences, or rather, simply not knowing what to say. Josephine approached the bed and began her reproaches. She wondered why she didn't go to bed and turn off the light when she should have. The dark-haired girl just stared wide-eyed without insisting. Anger suddenly seizes the interlocutor. She does not tolerate such an impudent attitude towards herself. The Viscount thanked this girl, but this does not mean that she has the right to speak to her in such a tone and snap. A slight note of disdain was reflected on Hammy's face. She didn't want to argue and further spoil the relationship when it would have been easier to just go to bed. In her mind, she had long ago agreed on everything. Contempt is the most disgusting character trait. The girl smiled falsely, saying that the girl was smart even though she didn't look like it. The scream filled the room again. The young lady still refused to calm down. She screamed about how Hammy had let her down and simply pretended that she was doing poorly, whereas when the Viscount and his guests appeared, the girl hung her head in embarrassment and irritation and just remained silent. She had nothing to say in response. The lady was an unbearable bitch. Literally out of nowhere, the headmaid appeared. A strict lady with glasses, showing with her appearance how fair she was, even without words. The next line was addressed to none other than Josephine. She should go back to her room and not try to start another conflict out of nowhere. There was nothing else to do but do it. The figure disappears into the doorway. The lady sighs in relief, only saying that she doesn't understand what's wrong with her, because the girl always tries to ruin someone's mood. It wasn't worth paying attention to such people. The lady turns to Hammy. The lamps in the servants' quarters are quite low on oil, so she should definitely go to bed early before it runs out. You shouldn't sleep in— The girl looked down at the floor. She didn't feel comfortable communicating with this woman because she didn't know her at all. It seemed that everything around was completely new and unknown. Laying in bed, Hammy couldn't fall asleep. She was wide awake, making it seem like she had been sleeping for the past week without a break. It was hard considering it was pitch black. The window attracts attention. Only one sash is open, and the moonlight stretches like a light trail across the room. The heroine's mind flashes with the thought of how beautiful the moon is. The solution comes immediately, and here are bare feet already on the wooden floor. The girl is not cold at all. She has one goal. For embroidery, even this lighting will be more than enough. Comfortably located on the windowsill, the beauty gets down to work. She has quite a lot to do before she feels tired and finally flies off to the kingdom of Morpheus. Morning came completely unnoticed. One of the main servants entered the hall and seemed to have lost the power of speech. The only thing he could utter was some incoherent muttering. The room was decorated with beautiful embroidery. All the tapestries, curtains, and even the carpets matched each other perfectly. The scarlet shades shone skillfully in combination with the blue walls. The curtains attracted the most attention. The handsome tigers and white flowers seemed to be looking straight at everyone around. The embroidery was truly wonderful. The ornaments and dragons with tigers look more like paintings. Everything is done in the best possible way, so there is nothing to find fault with, considering that no one asked for this to be done. Some rustling sounds from the curtains attract attention. The servant slowly raises his head in bewilderment. It turns out that the youth wakes up quite early, but no matter what. The girl carefully adjusts everything. The question of whether this is her work flies off her lips, and the answer is positive. According to her, her grandmother did not like it, and that is why she changed it. Sincere surprise and confusion are reflected on the man's face. It seemed to him or the girl was talking about some granny, and on the third day. The morning did not start as usual, and that's a fact. Realizing that they were looking at her strangely, Hammy stumbled and tried to quickly correct herself. She says that this is her doing, and everything that happened here today is not an accident or a fairy, but the young lady who is standing right here right now. Turning away, the old man couldn't believe his ears. How could an ordinary maid replace all the curtains in the house overnight? And with a handmade master, more comments reach the ear. Hammy finishes trying to fix the curtains and suddenly mentions the tablecloth. She managed to complete her work, but according to her, she is not sure that they will all be pleased. Another shock hits the servant. How can this be true? Both pairs of eyes look down, noticing something interesting. A beautiful embroidered dragon looks at people. Dark and light purple tones convey all the richness and high quality. The work is done successfully, and this cannot be undone. The man, without looking up, tries not to ask too many questions. The only one that interests him is whether it is true that the dragon is the work of a maid. Hammy tries to protest, folding her hands behind her back. It's not a big amount of work for her, so don't be so surprised. She doesn't ask for thanks because everything suits her. In the maid's room, there were sounds of admiration and disbelief. The voices were surprised. They were being offered valuable things, which it was completely unclear how they would get to them. The girls carefully try on the gifts. Beautiful lace, an exquisite hat, and lacy gloves, just what they needed. They had just talked about all these things just yesterday, and certainly did not expect to hold them in their hands today. Hammy watches all this with pride, putting her hand to her chest. Now you can always turn to her, and she will definitely do everything in her power to help and provide the desired things. The interlocutors break away from their conversations, not understanding what just happened. After all, the young lady couldn't just slip up like that, but everything ends quickly. The white gloves with the elaborately embroidered black roses fit the hands just perfectly. You can admire them for hours, no matter what. How did the maid manage to— The friends can't get enough of the new things. Even the ladies of the court don't have anything like this, because it all looks even better than in the store, which is amazing. There is no limit to the joy. The answer is a smile that spreads across her face. The beauty can't help but smile, knowing that her work has been appreciated. For those who have a needle and thread, there is only one question on everyone's mind. Can anyone really do this? Shock is reflected on the ladies' faces, who clearly do not believe her words. But perhaps the people present immediately surrounded Hammy from all sides. They absolutely must learn to knit like her, and there was no way to avoid it. Pleas for instruction poured in on the girl, who seemed— The young girls, without waiting for an answer, understand everything from the emotions of the interlocutor. Hugging the maid tightly, they cannot get enough of their little victory. Laughing, she only says that she should be— One of the girls almost jumped for joy. Without stopping asking Hammy if it was true that she agreed to teach them, they still couldn't tear themselves away from the lady. They just had to listen to all the instructions, but first they should know what to do. The dark-haired girl's dreams were quite logical, knowing how much she loves hats and everything connected with them. She really wants to make caps or hats. The blonde wants to make something more sophisticated than the lace gloves she received as a gift. Maybe some leg warmers or a blouse to wear. The youngest has many more requests. The only task is to learn how to sew pretty dresses. It makes absolutely no difference whether they are made with lace or with some other element, because the main goal is to create a thing. It should be The maid was slightly taken aback by the amount of work and decided to put her friends in their place, saying that they should think about their first job. The problem is that beginners can't do something complicated, and that's why it's worth choosing something more. The first step to be taken is to learn how to sew and sew on buttons. These are the very basics and should be easy to do. The answer is sorrowful words of agreement. The training is to start tomorrow. A friend told me to bring a hoop so I can start working. It is not the most difficult thing and can be easily purchased at any sewing. This is how the beginner's hand sewing classes started, opened in the maid's room. Everything is quite slow, but step by step, they become more experienced. Every evening, sitting on the floor near the bed of teacher Hami, the girls listen attentively to the. Just a few days later, the young lady's lessons become even more popular. Sitting in her room in the evening, maids from other rooms approach her, knowing exactly why they came. Almost in whispers, the dark-haired one is surrounded from all sides, interested in the conduct of the classes. Everyone in the area knows that her courses are very popular among people, and even experienced and adult maids want to get here. An extraordinary success. Silence enveloped the luxurious room. It seemed that it had crept into every corner, preventing one from penetrating. However, everything was broken by someone's words, which seemed to express discontent and surprise. A handsome red-headed youth with beautiful blue eyes. He and no one else was the one asking questions here. This was Cassian Winston, the young master of this estate, a beautiful bedspread, and it would seem everything looks great here. But the discontent came from the grass embroidered on it. The boy continued to be indignant at the inequality because his father's blanket had a dragon embroidered. Anger was not a factor here, but the young man clearly did not want things to remain as they were. Only his blanket had grass on it, and it was almost humiliating because he was the master. He should have been given. Approaching the fair-haired maid, Cassian begins to give unnecessary orders. The first thing he would like is for the blanket to be taken away and replaced with something else. More elegant. The young man was simply confused by the indignation and such impudence, but still decided to stand up for himself. He really didn't like it, and therefore asked for everything to be redone in the form he needed. His thoughts quickly took a wrong turn, and his thoughts led him in the wrong direction. He should have thought of this right away, but it took him a while to come to this conclusion. The best solution was to call the maid who had started all this in the first place. The gentleman begins to think out loud. He promises that he will tell the girl how to make a new one, but this time in a way that will suit him. But what if he still doesn't like it? It seems that the answer to this question has all. The lady couldn't get a word in, but she didn't need to. She knew perfectly well why young Cassian was doing all this. The guy clearly wanted to skip another lesson, which is why he said he wanted to have full control over the creation process, so he could have his. Not even a minute had passed before the boy started shouting. Impatience was taking hold. That was why there was such a reaction. The maid, only looking down, did not understand why she was chosen to be scolded. Tears rolled down the young lady's cheeks. She didn't want the young man to miss the lesson, so the best solution was to start asking him. It shouldn't take much time, so the lesson could go on time. Winston understands the situation he is in. He cannot get away from the work he has to do. Asking his interlocutor to stop crying, the guy says that he will. Already hiding behind the door, the blonde promises that she will immediately bring the lady here. It will not take more than 10 minutes, so it is just worth waiting a little. The gentleman is lost in his thoughts. With a smile on his face, he notes that it won't be difficult for him to pull off his cunning plan, namely, to give too many recommendations so that the girl won't be able to leave so quickly. Hami is sitting quietly on her bed in the bedroom. Her friend suddenly bursts into the room, calling her name and saying that Cassian wants to see her. Confusion quickly appears on the beauty's face. The question freezes on the girl's lips because she really doesn't understand what's going on and why it's all happening. There's no answer, because the interlocutor says that they should hurry. Trying to hurry, the girl suddenly remembers something and stops. Luckily, she had a good memory, so the words about needing fabric and thread fly out of her mouth. It was not worth forgetting. Hami is now asking directly what is going on and why she is being called somewhere out of the blue. The blonde, carefully gathering the fabrics into an armful, is trying to simultaneously tell about the young gentleman. There is no need for long reflections, and having finished with the preparations, the interlocutor offers to tell what awaits her friend, noting that as a maid, she should not tell this at all. But it will be better this. The girls are already walking quickly down the corridor, hung with beautiful red curtains. The words continue to flow in a continuous stream. You should always say yes and never refuse, because the story continues. The owner is really stubborn and fickle, and this is one of the worst character traits. It will still happen, and she will understand when she gets a slap on the nose. The blonde's face darkened noticeably. Memories had carried her away, somewhere far away. The next word, the girl seemed ready to cry. This story brought sadness even to people who had never been there, and especially to all the other members of the family. After the Viscountess passed away, this lady took the young man into her care and raised him as her own son. There was nothing more beautiful than her attitude towards the boy, but everything ended. However, in any case, Cassian is a man with a difficult and sad fate, even if the Viscount tried to find a new nanny for his son, which was unsuccessful due to the stubbornness of the baby. It was very difficult to cope with the young man's temperament, and therefore, even if one of the nannies matched the description and experience, she did not stay for long. Smiling a little, they stopped abruptly. The acquaintance hands over the necessary fabrics and threads into the hands of the dark-haired beauty. Not appreciating her humor, the things ended up in the girl's hands when, as the interlocutor continued her story, she should have finished all her business with the blanket before the teacher arrived, so that he could conduct the lesson without. The lady exhaled as if in relief, for it seemed that the girl understood everything. The only and final warning was that one should. The next second, the friend raises her hand and knocks on the ornate door. There is no answer, but she already knows she can come in, so the blonde, looking away, invites the main character in. A slight smile lit up the face of the acquaintance, and she decided to say her last words. She was going to go get ready for Professor Blake's arrival, so she only had 10 to 15 minutes before she had. The girl was left standing alone at this huge door. The maid had disappeared somewhere immediately after she finished her line. The only thing she had to do. The room is decorated even more richly, and therefore seems very luxurious. High, almost panoramic windows, dark curtains that clearly lack beautiful embroidery, and beautiful but ordinary chandelier. A handsome guy sits on a sofa, putting his hand to his chin. Blue eyes thoughtfully look away, making it clear that the man is clearly somewhere far away in his thoughts, not emerging. The maid does not dare to break the silence and tear the master out of his thoughts. She continues to stand quietly at the door, her hands clasped together. She really should say something, since confusion and even a little sadness are reflected on the face of the young heroine. In her thoughts, the girl is unable to believe that this baby is the young heir of the family. These thoughts do not give rest and are quite disturbing, but even stranger is the fact that the maid is strongly drawn to this boy. The young man is slightly distracted from his important thoughts. His eyes slowly run around the room and stop at the figure near the entrance. No one told him that the new maid is such a She is truly an extraordinary beauty. Perhaps if someone had told her about it earlier, everything would have been a little different. And then the young man would have shown himself in a better light. Black, shiny, short hair is so tempting, calling to gently run your hand through it. A cute face and graceful facial features. The girl can't help but attract. The smile, like the sun, illuminates everything around, allowing people to enjoy it to their heart's content. It is not clear how the beauty ended up here, but perhaps the main character says nothing, but her face expresses confusion. She is not very pleased that they are looking at her like this and saying absolutely nothing, but she is not. The girl is offered to sit down on the sofa, and her eyes automatically switch to the gray thing standing right in front of her. It's class time now, so why the offer to sit and talk about something? The young lady still doesn't dare to say anything, but a stroke of genius comes to mind. If anything, she can always come up with some excuse to leave right before class. Already sitting on the sofa, the lady tried to understand Cassian's words and understand what he really wanted. The boy wanted her to embroider the blanket again with a luxurious, but at the same time beautiful and attractive. The embroidery had to be special and impressive, but at the same time not too flashy. The guy and his requests were very difficult to understand, but Hammy continued to listen silently, trying not to miss it. He wanted the same size, but a minute later the young man changed his mind, wanting the size to be slightly smaller than the previous one. According to him, it would look much simpler, more elegant, and beautiful, so it would be worth hurrying. Without listening to anything else, the sweet person unfolded the fabric, where threads of different colors for every taste and wish were hidden, saying that now it was time. The thread was in the needle, and the girl immediately, without losing a second, began to work. With deft movements, something resembling the outlines of a future work of art began to appear on. Blue and green colors sparkled on the fabric. It was difficult to understand what exactly was depicted, so the guy wanted to ask something, but hesitated. A slight confusion took hold of every part of the body. The Viscount wanted everything to turn out as beautifully as possible, so that everyone around would literally envy him, and hope remains. Cassian is tired of sitting, apparently hoping that he can somehow control the work better, and so the boy carefully gets up from his chair, heading to the girl's place opposite him. The finger slides along the fabric, stopping somewhere near the white tiger's eye. The needle is literally a centimeter away from the location of his hand, which clearly does not frighten the guy at all. The girl's hand came closer with the speed of light. The clap seemed to deafen everyone in the room, not giving even a single chance to maintain proper silence. The young man, in turn, is very surprised. It was not clear to him why they had abruptly driven him away, and now they were trying to put him in his place. The reddened hand hurt just a little from everything that had happened. Hammy only exhaled, saying that he just needed to be a little more careful, because there was a needle here. The grandmother inside the girl perked up, and this time everything was completely different. The lecture on safety purposes was making itself felt, and so the conversation turned to the fact that the boy looked down at the floor and didn't understand why he was being scolded. In his opinion, it was just a small prick that wouldn't do any harm. All his thoughts poured out into words. The girl started the topic of illnesses and how some of them still have no cure, and half of them can be obtained through a needle prick, which should never be done under any circumstances. The image of a grandmother immediately pops in. The boy looked down at the floor, not understanding what else he could say. The young lady was right about everything, but a strange feeling still hung in the air. He had not expected such behavior. The topic quickly changed, and the conversation turned again to the drawing on the blanket. The girl said that she had finally finished, and the boy had to choose one of the proposed painting subjects. Interest showed on his face, but the answer was not long in coming. A hand reached for the bedspread, and the index finger pointed to one of the works of art. A white tiger would look very nice on the bed. Giggling a little, the dark-haired girl notices a small but interesting detail. It seems that the boy clearly loves tigers, and they are to his liking. This was noticeable even from afar, because it was difficult not to understand. The only question manages to fly off the young man's lips. He does not understand why the maid allows herself to communicate with him so informally, while everyone else, literally in horror, tries to avoid unnecessary topics of conversation and is afraid to talk about any confusion, that's all. The only dominant emotion on his face at the moment. Only recently has Hammy allowed himself to talk to the gentleman in such a tone as if they had already become friends. Disappointment flashed across the young lady's face. It seemed she wanted everything to remain as before, but she had not expected it to turn out exactly this way. She only had enough strength to mumble something incoherent. Seeing all the emotions on the face of the interlocutor, the red-headed man feels like the master of the situation. Words, without any hesitation, are rebuilt into sentences. The young man folds his hands on his knees and looks away conspiratorially. He had one idea to carry out his plan, so he talks about the condition he has for the girl to continue. The young people had different social statuses, and therefore Cassian could not simply give his consent without any reason. Hami understands that this is true, but fear deliberately creeps up on all sides. The conversation is suddenly interrupted. The red-headed man turns his attention to the door and notices something. It seems that Teacher Blake has already arrived. Hearing the mention of the lesson, Hammy realized that she was late and did not follow her friend's advice. Better late than never, so the brunette quickly got up from her chair. The decision to leave, already heading for the exit, the owner's voice stops him. The young man, indignant at such behavior, says that he has not yet finished what he called the girl for, and therefore she should sit back down, even if she did not really want to. The main character was clearly not pleased with such treatment, considering that her promise was now under threat, but she was not going to argue. Protests about the boy having a lesson soon. The door to the room slowly opens. A male voice says goodbye to Julia, saying that he can handle everything else, even if it will be quite difficult. Then the guy turns to the gentleman, saying, a handsome man with blonde hair and green eyes, his gaze thoughtlessly scanning the room, taking in everyone present. Words could not describe how beautiful he. The girl felt, to put it mildly, uncomfortable under the gaze of these two people who were in the same room with her. She wanted to say that she was very sorry, but the teacher was the first. Cassian puts his hand to his chin in a mock gesture, commenting on the teacher's terrible manners, who should now leave as quickly as he came in. It would seem that everything is going according to plan. The young man continued to sneer, talking about how he would like the teacher to learn how to burst into all the rooms without knocking. But the girl cut him off, getting up from the sofa. The kid rolled his eyes, not fully understanding what had just happened, because this maid had once again put him in his place, shaming him in front of the teacher, which he didn't like at all. Mr. Blake stood in mute silence, questions written on his face. He couldn't believe that a stranger would stand up for him under such circumstances, even if she shouldn't have. Hammy did not want to stop for a second, continuing to chatter. The young boy should respect the choice of his parents in the person of the teacher, because they only want the best, and he should also study well and diligently. Realizing that she had clearly said too much, the girl quickly left the room, throwing only a few additional words in farewell. The conclusion was one: it was worth studying. The door slammed shut on the other side, leaving the two people in complete silence, completely alone in the room. Neither of them fully comprehended everything that had just happened, or why this particular maid had behaved. The evening came completely unnoticed, lowering its darkness onto the city. The guy lies in bed and looks thoughtfully at the ceiling. Thoughts about Hammy are still swirling, trying to create at least some. The red-headed man couldn't stand it any longer, so he jumped up and sat up on his bed. The girl had dared to hit him on the arm, to embarrass him in front of the teacher, and all of this was clenching his fist in indignation. Cassian still couldn't understand what was happening to him now. He had never felt such strange anger towards anyone before. Informal speech irritated. The gaze fell on the bedspread with beautiful tigers. It should be said that it did not turn out very well, so the lady would have to redo it several times, but most likely she would have done it better and better each time. Where did the stranger? There was no more strength to look at the animal. The boy lay back down in bed, putting his cheek to the pillow, continuing to think about none other than the maid. How did she manage to be such a beautiful and... He didn't want to admit it to himself, but the lady was really very beautiful. All her facial features were very graceful, and her kind eyes seemed to beckon you to come up and hug her. In an attempt to forget, removing the image, not a minute passes before Cassian rolls over onto his stomach, still wailing. You can't be so charming without a reason. No one chooses. Burying himself in a soft, silky pillow, the young Viscount is still lost in his thoughts. This sweet person did not want to leave his mind at all, which was a little annoying. The morning began in a very unusual way. The gardener in uniform stood under the scorching sun and, holding scissors in his hands, prepared to continue his work. Attention was still drawn. The boy did not want anyone to ask unnecessary questions, but living in a castle, it is impossible to avoid. So this time, everything happened exactly the same. The old man didn't understand what the joke was about all this, so he silently looked away, casting down his gaze. The silence did not last long, because questions began to come out on their own. The first and most important was what had brought the guy here this early in the morning, when a flashback occurred in his head. Over the previous few hours, the young man had managed to visit several places almost simultaneously, namely He didn't want to go into details, so he quickly changed the subject and asked where he could find insects. Perhaps he should have said what kind of creature he was looking for, but that answer didn't follow. Taking full advantage of the kindness and being the master of the situation, Cassian hinted that it would be nice to find big ones, not small ones. The gardener's eyes widened, and the man himself wondered in bewilderment where the guy was going to use. The redhead suddenly thinks about something, but only for a second, and the next moment he is already returning to reality, noting that he still has one use for the unfortunate insects. His feet are wearing stylish and probably expensive shoes, and they step over the threshold. The sneakers that were good for digging in the mud have disappeared as soon as the young man got back from the yard to the estate. While searching for the maid, they finally succeeded. The beauty was sitting on her bed in the maid's room, quietly doing something, which was good news, since it hadn't taken more than 10 minutes. All that was left was to gather up the courage and come. The dark bag with the secret contents was placed right next to the girl. The boy noted that she should have unpacked it in his presence and that it was a gift from the heart. A slight surprise lit up the face of the interlocutor. Dark eyes opened wide, staring at the man standing in front of her, and still not believing what was said, the girl quietly asked again if it was really intended for her. Without giving her a single chance to get another word in, Cassian asked her to shut up and finally open his homemade package, assuring her that something incredibly wonderful was waiting for her there. Hami's spontaneous tone was still relaxing and deciding not to worry about all the existing circumstances. The young lady, tilting her head to the side, quietly agreed to open the gift, leaving no chance for reflection for herself. Right from the carefully wrapped package, cute silkworm caterpillars were looking at the girl. How could someone come up with such a strange idea for a gift? It was hard to believe that all this was the work of a... The praise was directed towards the young man. The maid remarked that the insects were not so bad because the young man had managed to catch so many of the huge and nimble creatures. Reaching her hand towards the boy's head, Hemi ran her fingers through his hair, gently ruffling his head, calling the boy a good child, which couldn't help but throw her into a stupor. Smiling as if confirming her words, the dark-haired beauty closes her eyes, talking about how good the boy is. At this moment, she doesn't care about anything at all. Everything continued with the girl taking pity on the caterpillars, recommending that they be released into the wild, rather than kept in a narrow and uncomfortable... The gentle taps on his pocket made it clear that he had to hurry before his patience ran out. Insects couldn't wait, even if it all sounded terribly ridiculous. The bundle that was handed back lies in the hands of the young man, while the maid continues to speak quietly to him. It would be worthwhile to begin right now, but the boy could not move from his place. The girl promises that she will continue embroidering while still with the same thoughtful face, but already in the garden. Cassian tried to come up with a clear explanation for the girl's behavior. The caterpillars quickly crawl along the asphalt, trying to escape into some abyss of nearby bushes, which is, of course, correct, but not so much that it can be done. Everything that happened no longer. Thoughts completely enveloped the young man, although he, in turn, without any intentions, tries to understand what is wrong here. He wanted to do another dirty trick, but everything turned out each time Cassian managed to come up with new ideas to slip something to the girl. However, the reaction was always quite surprising. The next time the boy tried much better, bringing with him a frog, which immediately ended up on Hammy's finger, while the young man himself, sitting in the bushes, was literally ready to burst. The only similarity was the ending of each of these pranks. The girl thanked the young man and then asked him to release the poor insects from the bag, because she did not like it at all. The boy, not understanding what he should do in order to finally get a negative or positive reaction, always remained confused after the procedures were completed. The sticks and bags remained unused. After a while of such communication and such gifts, the guy literally followed the girl around, listening to her advice and everything she told him. The young lady communicated with the young gentleman so informally, and also without any fear, as if he were her ward or an old friend who wanted to earn attention. Hammy had always been very responsible, and it showed very strongly. Cassian was tired quite often, and even now, one of the main servants could not understand what the problem was and why the master suddenly decided to change so much. Not understanding why he liked the new maid so much, the girl always feels sorry for the young Viscount. The boy never got to know the love of a mother or a nanny, and so it turned out that the main character took on these roles, as well as the role of her best. The season changed. The hot summer crept up on us unnoticed, preparing no one for its arrival. It was a good time of year, and a lot had happened. The friends succeeded in embroidery and thanked their savior madly often. Literally every time, as soon as one of them embroidered something new, everyone immediately ran to show it and rejoice. There were many thanks from ordinary servants, although, oddly enough, it did not seem to Hammy that she had done anything special, but this was not the case. The girl often helped the younger master in everything. Even such simple things brought maximum pleasure. Wherever the young lady went, she was showered with praise and gratitude, and, strangely enough, during this time she even succeeded in her business. Boredom seemed to be taking hold of the young Viscount's entire body, and he still had to read the history of the foundation of the state. The most terrible occupation, in his opinion, was reading. The boy sat in his chair, frowning, and continued to complain about everything. Sometimes it seemed as if he disliked all these lessons so much that one day he would simply run away without telling anyone. The girl, closing her eyes, tried to express her point of view. If you read a lot of books, you will become an outstanding and successful person, and it is really worth it if you think about it. Looking away, various thoughts creep into the guy's head, but he knows one thing for sure. It won't help him. According to him, the young man is already an outstanding person, so he doesn't need books. The conclusion was that Cassian had no intention of opening the book. Sadness enveloped Hammy, and she revealed that she had dreamed of learning to read all her life. The red-headed man, turning his head, wanted to laugh but held back. It seemed completely strange to him to want to learn about books. The girl admits that this is true because, in fact, she does not know how to read at all. The book fell out of the young man's hands with a characteristic noise and hit his knee. He couldn't believe that someone like his interlocutor couldn't do such a simple thing. Deciding not to think about it anymore, the boy continues asking leading questions, trying to find out the most accurate information. It really turns out to be true, and the girlfriend can't. This was perhaps one of the most unexpected news or discoveries in recent times. For some reason, the young man always thought that the girl could do literally everything. If a person is simple, then he does not always have to read. And on top of all this, Hammy is still very young, so everything is ahead. The words did not sound very convincing, and the eyes nervously darted around the room, not inspired. Deciding that words were of no use, the boy began to try to talk about all the virtues of his girlfriend. There were really a lot of them. It seemed to the guy that it was all simply amazing and deserved some praise. The girl sits with her eyes downcast, and it seems that she is about to cry. The young master reproaches himself for being capricious, for not wanting to read, or simply complaining about how hard the life of an aristocrat is in front of it. Without thinking twice, the red-headed man jumps up from his chair as a brilliant idea has come to him. The best option was to teach the young lady to read, and that is exactly what he proposes to do. Hammy doesn't understand what just happened, and whether this offer actually came from the mouth of this boy. She really wanted to learn, but she didn't know anything, just like she didn't know where to start. Patting the spot on the sofa next to him, the young man beckons his interlocutor, inviting her to change her position. Such thoughtfulness is reflected on the young woman's face. It seems that in her head she is weighing all the pros and cons, and it is difficult to understand which category is winning. Apparently, she didn't have to think long, because in a moment the maid was sitting right next to the young viscount, because she was told to do so. The guy was clearly a little nervous next to her, which was noticeable even to the naked eye. The girl understands deep down that these lessons will most likely not end well. In this world, for such a commoner, the inability to read is very natural and occurs in literally every second person. The lady had lived an unenviable life all her life. She always wanted something more, but it was all too difficult to implement in real life. The inability to do basic things and the lack of basic skills often ate away at Grandma from the inside. It seemed like a vicious circle with no way out, but eventually the first step was taken. The woman made up her mind and one day went to a school for old people. The teacher divided people into groups and taught groups of 5 people reading, writing. Everything was going well, but over time my eyesight began to deteriorate, and due to overwork, all the work was done hastily. As a result, the material was not absorbed. The old lady's wishes are a happy, complete family, the health of her loved ones, and learning to read. It's quite difficult to fulfill everything at once unless you're 25 and still very young and green. The girl wanted to learn to read books and write without anyone's help, and even with beautiful handwriting, and that's how it was supposed to be. But in the end, something went wrong. Just by turning in the wrong direction. It was completely unexpected, because for such an ignoramus like her, the road leading to peace and the path of enlightenment and dreams just opens up like that. The kid appeared like seaweed from nowhere. The girl didn't expect him to take on her training. The pen scribbles crookedly on the paper, making terrible creaking. The guy takes some incomprehensible piece of paper from his hand, carefully straightening it out, not trying to show anything. However, with the next word, Hammy was still distracted, deep in her thoughts, but a voice interrupted her. The remark that she was doing something incomprehensible was sternly voiced, and then the young master began to slowly read. The lady did a great job, and so the red-haired man, praising her, decides to move on through the alphabet, offering to continue with B and G. It is clearly not hard. Hammy seemed very interested in the process. The letters were quite easy, so they moved further along the rows as they wanted to. The index finger slid carefully along the smooth surface of the sheet, pointing to the hieroglyphs needed to be read. It was all really difficult, but quite possible and doable. The girl couldn't believe that at such an age it was possible to learn something new. It was always wonderful to learn, but sometimes everything didn't go as desired. And the young master continues to name the letters in turn, which should be continued to be read in order. The eyes themselves constantly try to look at the girl sitting next to him, which cannot help but distract from them. Violet eyes are focused on the parchment, and lips are moving slowly, trying to pronounce letters, at least as indistinct sounds. It really makes me smile a little, but at the same time, it's cute how as she continues reading, the guy simultaneously says that very soon she will be able to apply all her skills in practice. Perhaps it will be reading or maybe writing right away, which will become after some time. The maid suddenly remembered that it was dinner time. They should have stopped there because no matter how important studying was, eating on schedule. It worked especially after a moment later, Cassian interrupted her mid-sentence. He asked for the food to be delivered to the room so that they wouldn't have to stop or go anywhere. Hammy was clearly not happy with this arrangement. She glared at the young man, beginning her tirade about how important it was to eat with family at the same table, and that if he didn't, the boy slowly made his way to the door. He really didn't want to stop his lesson for food or anything since it was nice to be in such company, but he really didn't have a choice. The hand reached for the black door handle and was about to open the lock, but the words of gratitude made the limb freeze. The young man was really pleased with such an attitude towards himself, especially from a specific person like this girl. He wanted to scream with joy like a little child. Ignoring his remark, Hammy smiled, saying that for her today was something special and completely new. One of the best lessons in her life, and it will not be possible to change it. The young man had absolutely no idea what to say. The only right decision was to remain silent and, opening the handle, walk away. Walking down the corridor, accompanied by Josephine, the boy still could not understand what had just happened. He could not believe that he had heard words of gratitude. He only taught the girl a little bit of letters, but, according to her, she liked it too much. It was unexpected, but at the same time, it couldn't help but make him happy, because it was a picture of a beauty pops into his memories out of nowhere. The way her eyes ran over the lines, the way she tried to read and tried her best to make sure he liked everything. The boy was very, very happy with this arrangement, but it also meant that he should teach her something else so that she would not want to leave. The thought process was no longer able to stop. It was necessary to find some books for easy reading, but the most difficult question arose. A toothy smile announced the approaching success. For some reason, many useful things came to mind. It was worth trying to start with the fairy tales that the young man. The room of the managing maid, with closed shutters, was lit up with loud conversations and incessant laughter on the eve of sleep, which was not worth doing. Gossip is one of the maid's favorite pastimes. The blonde with the dreamy look was talking about how she had just managed to greet Colin, to which she had only heard a ton of admiration in response. Quite often, when hiring, the owner forbids any relationships at work, already knowing in advance how it can end, because sometimes people just fall in love with each other. This rule has befallen the castle. Next on the agenda is Josephine, the eternally angry and indignant girl who gives everyone orders. It would seem that her character let everyone down, and right after the rumor about how she got together with Colin, the young lady merely waved her hand in response to all this, declaring that the maid was not at all interested in that servant. On that vacation, she left the city limits and met another who caught her eye, and the girl met some hooligan in an alley, and he saved her, thus winning the heart of the young beauty. This rumor spread even faster than all the previous ones, without any reason. One of the girls with a mini haircut says that it looks more like some kind of romantic comedy, and perhaps she is not so far from the truth, since the story is really complicated. The man said nothing, not even his name, and disappeared under the moonlight. The description had long been known to everyone, because the man was incredibly handsome. Black hair and strong shoulders, a little sadness came over the girls and the whole room too. Apparently, a very attractive man had crossed her path since she was so lucky. Not everyone gets such a chance, and it was a pity that the young man simply disappeared. The conversation no longer wanted to be sad, and so one of the maids started talking about her type of men. Blondes are the best in the world. as are blue eyes, which literally make a blonde and a brunette get into an argument. One of the ladies says that there is nothing special about guys, while the other tries to contradict them by saying how beautiful they are. The argument flares up out of nowhere, so one of the older maids is there, gently spreading her hands and trying to hush up the conflict before it could escalate into something more complicated and bad. A brilliant idea comes to her mind, which will surely please everyone present. The questions fall on Hammy. Now she has to answer and she can't get out of it. Innocence is reflected on the girl's face, but all the ladies wanted to know what her ideal is. In a split second, the young beauties are already sitting on the floor around the bed where the girl is. She is still very young, but this does not mean that she does not have an ideal, so it is worth checking. Doubts creep into her head. The young master has been following the maid everywhere for weeks now and always shares all the new news with her, so anything could happen. But no such luck. Both of them suddenly fall silent, as if remembering that the subject of discussion is still in the same room with them, and they certainly shouldn't continue in the same spirit as before. One of the girls stutters, unable to imagine how Cassian would dare to look down on such a beautiful person. He would not have the courage, because he still needs to grow and grow to perform such an act. There is no way a young man could like a girl. It would be a lie even if it happened. The girls continued their reflection, saying that even if Cassian proposed, they should fight for him to the end. The brunette, still holding the paper in her hands, tried not to pay attention to anything. Conversations about nothing were not her element, but at the moment they were the only ones surrounding the girl. While those in the room continued to discuss the interesting topic of what their children would look like, Hammy was not listening to them. She was learning the alphabet, and so she was completely immersed in her thoughts. One of the girls noted that no matter what anyone said, the young master was very attractive. His appearance was truly extraordinary beauty, and all the friends agreed that they had never met anyone more beautiful. The maid with the pixie cut keeps asking herself questions. It's really interesting what the guy's future will be like and how everything will turn out. But the character spoils the whole thing again. The conversation is interrupted by a knock on the door, which seems quite unexpected. Silence falls like a wave on the room. All three beauties freeze, looking at the door. Only everything that was happening pulled the girl out of her thoughts. The alphabet cramming was unceremoniously interrupted, and so her eyes stared somewhere to the side. Hearing the young lady's voice, the woman behind the door quickly realized who she was talking to, and already switching to requests, she says that there was a pesky fortune teller outside. It would be nice if someone gave her some food. Apparently, the head maid was busy with something very important, so the maids had no choice. They had to follow the instructions to avoid being thrown out of here. The main character did not understand what the problem was and what was going on. It was unclear what fortune teller was being talked about and what she was, but this was a new task with the help of which all this had to be found out. Sighs were heard from all sides. The blonde says that this is not something they should talk about, but if you think about it, then coming to such a small family of viscounts is a bit of a cruel punishment. Hammy didn't understand what was being discussed, and that's why it was difficult to decide what exactly she should say and what her reaction should be. The best solution was to just remain silent. News began to spread throughout the town not so long ago, and all of them, as one, about this fortune teller. Because of spending time with the young gentleman, the girl completely fell out of love. It turns out that there are rumors that a fortune teller goes to every aristocratic family in search of the future wife of the crown prince. It seems like one of the most disappointing ideas for earning money for food. At first, the girl was received with open arms and kindly treated, but when she was repeated, they began to treat her much more easily, not pitying her. The main character's face only grew sadder. A slippery smile spreads across the brunette's face. She is disgusted by all swindlers, and because of them, the honor of normal people is hurt. It seems that nothing is being done. The girls were all around her again. Hammy, giving her directions. She was the one who would have to face that imposter today. The whole operation was pretty safe, because if you didn't believe a single word that was said, everything would be. The girl goes into the kitchen and is greeted by a cheerful greeting from a red-haired man. Offering her something to eat, he simultaneously asks why she came and if there was a reason for it. The main character smiles tenderly. She always liked this man from the very first day of her stay in this place. He really got it from the young master because of his bad character. But since the young lady appeared in the estate, the young man had obviously remembered something and was therefore quickly bustling about in the kitchen. It was rather strange, but it was only worth waiting a couple of minutes, and this terrible secret could be revealed. The next second, a bowl of custard materializes in front of the girl. She loved cakes and muffins with this filling, which the man was well aware of. It is a cream created especially. As he hands the dishes over to the maid, red-haired continues to smile, saying that if anything, he is always ready to give more so that they can all eat together and enjoy themselves. Joy knew no bounds. These small gestures of attention always seemed insanely sweet and charming. Words of gratitude were already like an obligation. Nodding in response, agreeing with the request, the hero asks if there is anything else needed. Without thinking twice, the girl asks for ham and cheese, if possible. Such a small thing could make her happy. Turning around and going to the other side of the kitchen, the man picked up the basket and began to carefully put all the necessary things. The first in line was bread, and bread is the most important. The assumption sounds convincing enough to put it into action. The basket is already full of baked goods and other food. Just what you need. The guy asks who she is going on a picnic with, to which the answer is not what one would like to hear, but what they were obliged to do. The food was intended for the fortune teller herself. In just a moment, 2 baskets full of food appeared in the hands of the fragile girl. A quick thank you made it clear that she had been pleased, but in her mind it seemed that she had been given too much. The sun shone brightly outside the window, illuminating the estate. The white columns looked quite massive and majestic compared to the people. The main character carefully opens the door to the street, still holding tightly the baskets with all sorts of food. It was not worth attracting too much attention, but she urgently needed to find that very fortune. A slight confusion appeared on Hammy's face, letting her know that her goal had been achieved. Someone was standing very close, right in front of the girl. The stranger was wrapped in a black cloak with a beautiful golden ornament. Her face was not visible, just like other parts of her body. Only secrecy, which wafted from a kilometer away. Noticing the details of her clothes, the heroine decided to ask at least one question. The girl was dressed too tightly, and the interesting thing was, a second later, a jug of milk appears in the hand. The recommendation was to drink it quickly. It would certainly help with thirst and prevent the sun effect. It seemed as if the fortune teller had absolutely no strength or emotion. When she said thank you, she almost staggered, making it clear that the clothes were indeed not quite suitable. The stranger, head bowed, greedily drinks the offered drink. Thirst has taken over her entire body, forcing the maid sitting next to her to think about how long they had to wander. Tearing himself away from the jug, the man praises the food of this house, because it is really prepared very skillfully and, on top of all this, with soul put into it. Smiling, the maid assures that everything is fine and there is still plenty to choose from, so there is no point in rushing. The food needs time to digest, so the only correct recommendation is to eat. Patting her interlocutor on the shoulder, as if expressing a kind gesture, the girl continues to talk incessantly. Young people are very inspiring, but in order to get strength from just about to take another bite of this wonderful sandwich, the boy pauses and asks if the lady would like to eat anything. It all sounds nice enough, but they call her Granny again. Turning half around, the boy holds out an untouched sandwich, offering his grandmother something to eat, because it is very tasty, and it seems that she herself would really like it, despite everything. A slight embarrassment mixed with surprise is noticeable somewhere in the depths of Hammy's eyes. She misheard or was just called old lady without a good reason. No one here knew about. The young man, smiling, says that she should not be afraid and should not worry about anything. Since he saw this girl, the abilities, so to speak, have grown, and new, unusual skills have emerged because she is a fortune teller. Giggling, the guy talks about how great his mood is today, so he can tell something. But as a person, he expresses himself only to Grandma. Sitting closer, the interlocutor began to tell about how the future wife of the crown prince really lives in this castle. The girl only raised an eyebrow, saying that this is not true, since this is said literally in every house. The thing is, no one knew where exactly this girl lived, so the best solution was to go door to door and search, long and hard, but eventually reaching the goal. It was really worth it and could help everyone around. The boy clearly had no intention of interfering in the affairs and problems of the future, just as he didn't want to ruin the past. So he should relax and not even think about anything there. The interlocutor mentioned that the rumor about Granny was not particularly important, so why spread it? Something lifted from the girl's soul, realizing that this was what Hammy thought about everything that was happening. But the next moment she realized that there was no point in it, and only quietly asked again whether it really was unimportant, receiving an answer that she did not expect at all. Had similar situations ever happened? There was no clear explanation. She found herself in a child's body, and it worried her, to put it mildly. A little, even if her current life was quite wonderful. But there were pulling his hood almost to his chin, the stranger continues to talk about how, after all, it doesn't matter anymore. The girl shouldn't worry, but just live as her soul desires. The only thing that remained cloudy was that the fortune teller did not see and did not know whether it was a gift or just fate. The prints were quite blurred, and therefore nothing came out. It was incredibly difficult for the girl to accept these words, but at the same time they caused some joy, allowing her soul to dance. She really could live the way she wanted, and finally not think about anything. An unexpected inspiration dawned on the beauty. The question had been on the tip of her tongue for a long time, but only now she had the courage to ask. What happened to the child who lived in this body before the girl was reborn? The sandwich slowly rose to his mouth. The man says that he once again claims to be a fake. As for this question, the old woman was in this body from the very beginning, but she just found out about it much later than it was necessary. Everything was so confusing that it was very difficult to figure it all out right away, considering that the interlocutor continued to eat at the same time. It turns out that they both initially had the same souls, but after the separation, the owner of the body is none other than the granny, so the body can be disposed of at one's own discretion. Shocked by such news, the girl still could not believe it. They have one soul for both of them. But then it is unclear where Hammy's memories disappeared to. Because after that morning when the beauty woke up in the mansion, it was impossible to remember. Literally reading the thoughts of the person standing next to her, the fortune teller tries to incite. She probably doesn't remember her adventures that happened when she was 15, to which the lady only nods, because it's true. Having caught the maid on the right answer, the man assures that the same reason is here and there is absolutely nothing strange. You just have to accept reality. With each passing minute, the number of doubts grew. Moving closer to the young man, she continued to ask again whether it was true and whether he really thought so. It was simply impossible not to remember even a small moment from your life. But the fortune teller quickly interrupted the girl again, clarifying, "It's incredible, just incredible, how big the soul of a child at 15 years old had to be for everything to go well without any hitches or bad things." Having completely finished his meal, getting up from his seat, the guy once again reminds that there is no point in worrying. Very soon, a little time will pass, and the current image will become habitual. The body becomes young, and naturally the soul too. This cannot be changed, and it is worth accepting. All changes are always for the better, or they can be corrected so that everything works the way you want it to. Long, graceful arms rise into the air to stretch. The fortune teller says that his mouth hurts like crazy from talking for so long, but he doesn't regret anything. Turning towards the exit, the magician smoothly moves to the final notes of the conversation. It was not worth delaying for another second, because with each minute, Hammy asked a question, trying to find out who could fall into the clutches of this place, but no clear explanation followed. There was one scary person here who could arrange for the magician to have his ears torn out. The main character was overcome with excitement. It wasn't that she cared, but without knowing a name or a face, the chances of seeing each other again were exactly 0. It might have been easier if she knew exactly how to The eyes lit up, remembering the good news. What was more important now was that the girl had to manage someone else's life and somehow live without any thoughts, trying to realize all her past dreams and ideas. At first glance, it seemed like an overwhelming... The young master and Hammy were sitting on the couch in the room they usually spent most of their time in. The training, as if on schedule, had started again. The girl was trying to read some simple children's. The story was clearly not the best one. The kitten eats the mouse right after another conversation. Having read up to this point, the girl widened her eyes, trying to understand why she was being punished in the form of this book. The red-headed one forbids stopping and recommends to just continue reading, because the further you go, the more interesting the plot becomes. The girl quietly smiling, understanding the heroine's tenacity, the young man says that this story is about a mouse and how it fights for life inside a cat. In his thoughts, the red diligently reading and trying to pronounce absolutely all the sounds, the girl already finishes reading the first paragraph, from which she manages to find out that this is only the first day of 7 days during which Luca is going to get out. The mouse begins his explorations, walking around in the cat's belly, while the book is literally at Hammy's eye level. The guy sat silently next to him, turning his gaze to the person. The eyes slide over the girl. The young man notices her beautiful lips, with which she so ineptly tries to pronounce words correctly. The maid's uniform almost always flaunts on the girl, but this time everything seems A call from the right side of the sofa brings me back from my thoughts to reality. The dark-haired girl asks how to read a certain word, which in fact turns out to be a simple and easy word: death. Quickly, thanks to her teacher, the girl just continues reading her entertaining story. The word fit perfectly into the right sentence, which couldn't help but please. The only choice to get out in the story was not the best. Or, to put it simply, just strange. With each word she read, the girl's eyes widened more and more. She stopped, turning to the gentleman, asking if he thought it strange. The book had a peculiar spelling, as incomprehensible as its contents. This could not help but just taking the book in his hands, the young man, without even thinking, confirmed his words, saying that the plot was indeed a little strange, which could not help but confuse him. The best solution would be the bewilderment makes it clear that the interlocutor was clearly not prepared for such reactions, and in general was not prepared to read such books with such a genre. The boy offers another book, The Feud of Apple and Peach. But a second, Cassian had clearly expected to hear a refusal to read such works, but when asked about it, the answer was only a short yes. There seemed to be no sensible reason for this. The girl immerses herself in her reading again. The Peach and the Apple was not one of the best children's stories, but it was certainly not the worst. The conversation developed, and more details were learned from this story. The book talked about how the apple's provocations made the Peach's cheeks turn even pinker. This moment had absolutely no key meaning. But looking at the girl, the young pink, peach-like cheeks, concentrated eyes showed how innocent the girl was, which could not help but attract attention. A wild excitement covered Cassian like a cold wave. It seemed that the guy became even more nervous when he caught himself thinking about things in such a way. It was incomprehensible. Not finding any valid excuse, the young man stopped the girl, saying that this was enough for today. His hand dropped to the book, as if trying to make him be listened to. The girl could only blink her eyes in response. The first excuse he came up with seemed pretty convincing. The boy started talking about Master Blake, saying that it was almost time for class and they should continue next time so they would have time to prepare for class. With his head cocked to the side, Hummy can't believe that all of this just came from the mouth of the boy himself, who, by the way, couldn't shut his mouth. According to him, the main character looked thoughtfully at the floor. She was sure that nothing like that had happened, and perhaps the young man had simply gotten sunstroke from the rays, which was, of course, self-deception. Hurrying up and already approaching the door, the guy opens it slightly, as if inviting, giving instructions and saying that she should go already. Staying too long was not a good idea. Someone had clearly beaten the couple to it, because a moment later, the teacher was standing in the room, rolling his eyes in surprise, realizing that he might not have arrived quite on time. There was no apology, but that was how it was. The tone of his voice had become almost hostile, and Cassian, by declaring that he still seemed to have a little time left, was almost trying to send the teacher away. Even Blake's patience was running out, crossing every line. Straightening his back and preparing a whole tirade on this matter, the man says that at the last lesson, it was said that it would be moved an hour earlier today. Apparently, a slight wave of anger takes over the hero. The fist slowly clenches and falls limply, unable to say or do anything. You can't help the problem with anger or force because everything was really discussed a long time ago. The teacher, however, was not going to be too verbose. A slight smile lit up his face because the impression was creeping into his head that the rumors were indeed true, which certainly could not but please. Mr. Blake bows his head gallantly and greets Hammy, saying that he knew they would meet again. The greeting he returns is just as warm, though nothing less could be expected from this girl. So to speak, a note of disgust is drawn on the expression of the young Viscount's face. He whines again about the incomprehensible greeting, which is smiling even wider, the blonde reassures them that he just wanted to know how true the rumors were. Maybe he shouldn't have said that, but there was no going back. The kids were very curious to know, so without missing a beat, the man says that everyone is whispering about how the young master is teaching this lady to read. Quite convincing, except that there is also a room. Pretending to put his hand to his cheek, the teacher began to talk about how worried he was. The young man had no intention of studying, which meant that in that case he was powerless and could hardly teach anyone else properly. The anger starts to show again, taking over. Cassian frowns, asking if he was hearing things or if this was genuine displeasure at the elite's actions. The conversation smoothly flowed into checking homework. Knowing that the young man had not read The History of the Foundation of the State, he decided to tease, saying once again, the offer was, to put it mildly, unexpected. Mr. Blake, turning to Hammy, said that today she could attend their lesson. The certainty that she would receive a huge amount of information did not give her peace. Opening her mouth in surprise, she only had enough strength to gently ask again whether it was true and whether she really could. This practice was one of the best, and the offer was more than tempting. Even after several minutes, it was still impossible to believe, so the girl just pointed her finger at herself cutely, trying to believe everything that was happening, while the man smiled softly. The next second, the blonde leans over the lady's ear and starts talking in a conspiratorial tone. He really thinks that if Hammy is present at the lessons, Cassian's behavior will improve, which could be very beneficial. As she continued to tell all the good and bad things about the upcoming event, the girl caught herself thinking that this was one of the best ideas in recent times. It didn't take long to force or think. The beauty looked resolutely at the owner and, still addressing Black, confirmed her involvement. Both stood aside and smiled sweetly as if nothing had happened, when, as a young man, he was clearly in shock. His eyes widened. He could not believe what he was hearing, because it was unthinkable. Distracted from the interesting dialogue and turning towards the sofas, the lesson begins. Today the topic was the same, about the history of the state. We stopped on page 302, which means Hammy quickly sat down on the sofa next to the teacher, still smiling. She folded her hands and seemed to have forgotten about the other person in the room. Her words were finally finishing him off. Horror and some disappointment took over the young master's mind. It was really unpleasant, and he wanted to say something about these two, but it didn't end well. The man takes out some unnecessary papers from his briefcase on which, probably, another strange topic is written. The girl moved even closer, talking about how she can't wait to— Cassian froze and seemed ready to cry. Why everything had turned against him was unclear. It wasn't that something terrible— The boy presses his hand to his body, looking down at the floor, but still noticing the couple who continued to talk, without a clue as to the meaning of any of the words. The situation was, he catches himself thinking that the whole problem is in Hammy, who is sitting here. He would really like to throw the girl out of his head and admit that it was worth it a long time ago, because standing here in the middle of the room, he felt completely broken. Blake was really very handsome. His manner of communication was able to bribe everyone around him, which is why he didn't want to leave these two at all. The guy knew that a lot of maids in the— A quick and unclear thought flashed through my head like a whirlwind. I didn't want to believe it, but what if the maid also liked the professor? And there was no— Such strange things, he didn't even want to think about them. He just wanted to forget about everything and never return to it. Assuring himself that this couldn't be, and that it was all a lie, young Cassian shook his head. Sighing, the guy understands that he has no choice. No one will let him just stand there and analyze the situation in silence. so he will have to walk on the spot and listen carefully to the. Already sitting in the chair near the table, the boy decided that he would try not to say a word. He did not want to attract attention, and on top of all that, the sight of these two was still terribly irritating, for no reason at all. The teacher watches the red-headed man take the stack of papers and start reading them. He was right after all, and the fidget's behavior improved as soon as this young lady appeared here. Something had definitely changed. After some time, a great idea came to the teacher's mind. He wanted to organize some kind of mini-quiz in which he would have to participate. Therefore, the question about the creator of the summer, Cassian was still lost in his thoughts, and so obviously he didn't hear the answer right away, which was quite strange. Only after 10 to 15 seconds, the young man realized that he was asked something and gave an answer. The professor says that this is right, and the person sitting next to him smiles proudly and shows signs of support, making it clear that she is still there and is happy because he is making great progress. In the aristocratic world, there is an order of things. Something goes away with time, and something comes, and this is inevitable, because power changes, and after that, each new ruler wants to establish his own new laws. This is not a bad setup at all. Two young souls who clearly have feelings for each other, expressing care and other feelings, seem to be just waiting for the moment when they would be allowed to fly out. When the time comes, there are things that rightfully return. One of these things is time itself, but also in this category can be included heat and cold, which the two maids who are in the yard cleaning seem to be exhausted by the scorching sun. Their red faces and sweat make it clear that they have been there for more than an hour, although they have no choice. One of the girls started talking about a magical cooling tool that was part of the Emperor's chamber. It would have been much better if a man had used it, or if each of them had been able to do it. But it was not to be. Hammy bowed her head and placed it on her hands, remembering that there was definitely talk of magic. She had heard about it and more than once, but it all turned out to be pure truth. Trying not to think about how surprised she was by magic, the girl remembers her past life. In that dimension, there were phones that you could use. At the moment, this heat and this weather are more important than any magic. The young lady bent over, trying not to fall because of how much the sun was beating down on her head. When she woke up, she decided that this couldn't go on any longer, and that she had to do something urgently. There was no time to waste, and she had to come up with some idea that would save everyone from this heat. A minute later, the beauty was already on her way to the kitchen, and a few minutes later, she was standing right next to the entrance. The first thing she wanted to say was about Sujongwei. They should cook. The chef, who had appeared literally a second ago, tried to repeat the name but stumbled and asked again what it was. The answer was not long in coming. It turned out to be a drink made of cinnamon and ginger. The man stands there in bewilderment. There are so many ingredients that it seems like it's not a drink at all, but something else. Hammy eagerly replied that it was. No need to get hung up on the ingredients or other things, because this mixture helps to endure the heat much better than ordinary chilled water. The man, without thinking twice, agrees, moving around the kitchen towards the table where he could lay out all the necessary things. The girl seemed impatient. The first thing that appears on the table is cinnamon and ginger. A very pleasant smell spreads throughout the room, but the idyll is interrupted. The red-headed man says that he got everything he needs, but is the girl really sure that these are the right ingredients? Looking at the table, the girl says that everything is great. Another highlight could be persimmon or pine nuts, but overall everything will work out and will work even in this form. Smiling, the interlocutor says that he is happy with this turn of events. Only Hammy wanted to give literally everything she wanted. This person was so beautiful that it was. The cook, of course, takes on the cooking. This is his profession, and he was sure that he would do everything in the best possible way. The girl was ready to stay here and manage the process so that Sujongwa would turn out Less than 30 minutes passed before the process was finally complete. Making the final adjustments, the beauty says that now the drink needs to be left to simmer for another hour, then cooled and bottled. After a while, the first bottle was legally ready and filled with an unusually smelling mixture, making it clear that the two young people had done an excellent job. The man was almost falling asleep on the go. The main character immediately noticed this, saying how tired the man looked after everything that had happened, although there was no particular reason for it. Rubbing his tired eyes with his hand, the interlocutor apologizes for accidentally dozing off when the situation did not require it. In response, the only thing heard was that the girl did not. Although time passed unnoticed, what was more important was that now the finished drink could be tasted and appreciated. The dark-haired lady was already holding a small container with a poured portion in her hands. A slight disbelief is reflected on the face. It was quite logical since the cook had never tried anything like this before, so this mixture was a revelation of the century. The resulting drink was more like coffee, but the smell was very different from the usual. Sujungwoo is drunk not from cups, but from bowls. No one knows why it is custom. When he brought the container to his lips, the man clearly didn't expect anything special. But he tried it out of politeness and because, after all, this drink took more than 2 hours to prepare. After taking just a sip, the man tore himself away from the bowl, trying to formulate his thoughts into clear words, but his attempts were not successful, even if he tried very hard. The taste was incredible, juicy. As if he found himself in a refreshing. The girl, seeing the pleasure they were experiencing, carefully asked if her potion had suited the cook. What was important was the assessment of a person from the outside, not the one who had prepared it. The red-headed one still couldn't bring himself to say anything. Every time after one word he stuttered or stopped, saying that it was very good. However, the dark-haired one still persisted, asking again. Finally, giving free rein to his feelings, a stream of words flowed from his mouth. It was really insanely delicious, and no one denied it. No one had ever tasted such deliciousness, because the combination of ginger and it still didn't fit in my head how it happened. The cooking process didn't look complicated, and the taste was achieved with such simple ingredients. Usually, some problems still arise as soon as you start cooking, but quickly changing his mind, the cook says that this won't do. You can't give it to the maids because you should treat the Viscount too. Absolutely everyone should try it, and so today you will need to serve this drink for dinner. While she says that it's not worth thanking, the girl doesn't mention that there are a few more equally important elements of preparation that complete the process. Now that the drink is already cold, if everything is done properly, then the maids, suffering from thirst and heat, will be able to look under the tree and take a bottle if necessary. The answer was not long in coming, and the red-headed one, the heat really killed all strength and desire to do anything. Because of this, everyone looks powerless, and therefore the potion will definitely please everyone. You don't have to be a fortune teller to be sure of your actions. The man takes all the bottles in his arms, trying not to drop a single one. The main character, standing behind him, only says that Sujungwoo can be prepared more than once, so you can safely dispose of the drinks. Thoughtfulness descended on the beauty's mind. Now it seemed to her that this time it was worth preparing Sikyo rather than Sujongwan. There were simply a whole bunch of ideas. It was definitely worth choosing at least one of them for herself. The cook, who seemed to want to leave, turned his head towards the girl, asking again what it was. Now it was interesting to find out absolutely all the details. A sunny, hot day and the castle residents who are now constantly discussing Sikyo and Sujongwa. The people called them day and night tea, so that it would be easier to remember the names, and if necessary, the blonde agreed with her interlocutor. All the people in this house had long ago tried these wonderful drinks. There was not a single person who did not know what was happening and what these potions were. Rumors had it that even Mrs. Piella had come to try the two teas. The woman apparently liked them very much too, and so later the Viscount himself thanked Hammy again for the work he. There is very little time left before the lesson. The teacher talks to the girl about something and then hands over a beautiful black book. It turns out that it was gratitude for the drinks he was given last time. It turns out that according to Blake, he had read this book when he was still studying at the academy, which meant he was sure that the young woman would like it. The girl did not know how to accept gifts, so she began to say that she should not have given anything. However, it was just a sign of gratitude and attention. The book had to be with the girl because Red Desert is a classic masterpiece, and no one has the right to argue with that. The description really sounded great. The story was about a chase that takes place outside the country. The professor notes that the text may be similar to a martial arts manual. A smile spreads across the heroine's face because surprised at how modest the girl is, the teacher notes that she is an even more skilled craftswoman than rumors say. The confrontation continues. Placing his hand on his chest, Blake makes a pleasant comment about how glad he is that the young master has someone like Hammy by his side. Hammy, in turn, says roughly the same thing. Listening to all this was not the best idea for the young master. The face expressed only dull colors and emotions. Before the girl appeared in the lesson, no tricks helped to him. Thoughtfully putting his finger to his chin, the guy tries to understand what is so special about this professor. His interlocutor's ringing laughter blooms like a flower even at the edge of the earth. A thought came to mind. Perhaps the beauty simply likes smart and handsome men. The teacher could not help but fit this description, so there was no doubt. It was hard to wrap my head around. Hard to believe. Was it true or not? Was Hammy really just like the other maids who all liked Mr. Blake? This thought hurt my conscience. If you think about it, the maid is still very young. She is only 15 years old, which means that in the eyes of the blonde, she looks like a little child. And this cannot be changed, because age is not subject to control. Is this really unrequited love? Because the girl, it's worth forgetting about it. Otherwise, everything will only get worse. There was no better solution than to jump up from my seat after 10 minutes of silence and shout that the guy also has a lot of books. The confusion conveys the words that were not asked, which perhaps one wanted to ask, but did not want to interrupt the young man. It was obvious that he was in no mood at all, which was not a very good sign. According to the red-headed man, it would definitely be better this way. All unnecessary books could be given to Hammy, who would definitely enjoy reading them from morning till night. Heading to the exit, the boy asked. Still without saying a word, the two stood and looked at the door, after the gentleman who was leaving. No one understood what had just happened and why this performance had been arranged, but it was immediately clear that he was. Literally a second later, the blonde stopped thinking about the boy, and turning his head towards the young lady, continued the conversation. His wife really liked it, and she was incredibly happy to try the drinks that really helped her. Hammy did not expect such a turn of events, but she began to smile even more than before, because the more people she managed to please, the happier she had to be. The wife also offered to give her a book, and it was very nice of her. The girl was glad that she had managed to please Mrs. Blake, so the best option was to ask the man to convey her words of gratitude to her as soon as he returned home. Cassian seemed ready to fall over from the sheer number of books. He already had 4 in his hands, but that was not enough, and so, grabbing on to everything possible, it was impossible not to look at the two of them who were still chatting about something. The professor mentioned that his fiancée had very severe toxicosis, and therefore, putting her hand to her cheek, expressing concern, the girl is glad that it happened this way. But then says that the girl promises that in future she will prepare drinks more often so that the man can share them with his wife. A hand falls on the shoulder of the interlocutor, who looks completely confused. The main character, in turn, says that everything is fine, because it is so hard for pregnant women. She knows everything, literally insisting. The girl says that it will not be difficult for her to take care of his wife, and the least she can start with, and what she can do is prepare drinks for consumption at least several times a week. There were a lot of ideas, and one of them was to create some clothes for the child. Today, the girl had plenty of time after the lesson and doing all her duties, so it was a chance to do something interesting. The city of Divine Heel was only a kilometer away from the mansion. The road did not take that long, allowing you to roam around if you left early in the morning. The main character, dressed in a beautiful black dress, stood in the middle of the road, not quite understanding where the thing she came here for was. She needed a shop with fabrics, which she had long since run. Passing other shops and beautiful green bushes, Hammy was still trying to figure out where this shop should be. There was no way out, since it was not worth returning without fabrics. Something flying from above caught her attention. It wasn't a very heavy thing, but the girl didn't think she would see something like that in the city, let alone in this world. A beautiful paper airplane fell into the hands of a little girl. It almost crashed into a bush, but she had to jump to catch it. Her eyes dropped to the find, and the girl suddenly noticed that the thing was not empty. On the paper from which the toy was rolled up, something was written in ink, as if intended for someone. The eyes quickly ran over the lines of the paper, which had to be unfolded to get a full, readable sheet with a message. It seemed that all this was written by some magician. The man wrote that he had managed to read all the drafts of the Principles of Magic sent last time, but in terms of conclusions, nothing could be drawn from it. It seems that in order to preserve the peaceful part of magic, it is worth expanding the stages to 12 again, instead of 8. But this does not look too convincing. The theory of Rombride, the sender asked not to engage in useless activities because it affects the integrity of the soul and the future that the recipient managed to see too much. It was about spying on someone. Without using magic, the attention is drawn to a small inscription placed at the very bottom, immediately after the text. Alfie is the name of the sender. The strange encryption was created for other purposes, but it wasn't immediately clear why all this was happening and who it was sent to, but the heroine noticed that the letter was clearly not intended for her. She had no connection with magic. The first thing to do was to fold the paper again. It should look like an airplane again, exactly the same as it was before it fell into Hammy's hands. The beautiful toy was back in the hands of the main character. It seemed as if no one had ever taken it apart. The girl was pleased with her work. Raising his hand, the airplane took off. Having risen into the air, the toy flew in the other direction, even without any wind force. There was still something very strange about what happened. The beauty's eyes lit up with a lively sparkle. There are still things in the world that can surprise, but at the same time do not require too much energy. Just a piece of paper that seems too beautiful. After only 10 minutes of searching, the beauty appeared right in front of the dark wooden doors. The comic book store was successfully found, which meant that success had been achieved. One of Hammy's most important skills is to quickly cope with the tasks at hand. The girl managed to order fabric for new clothes for the teacher's baby. Then it was time to go for treats at the request of colleagues. A shop caught his attention, located just a meter away from the place the young lady had just visited. His head slowly turned, noticing something interesting to himself. A small but wonderful figurine of a white tiger stands alone in the display case. Cassian said that he liked tigers, but even without words it was possible to understand this, since he always asked. The young man, not understanding what just happened, stares at the figurine of the animal in his hands. It's quite cute, and he would like to say more words, but looking up at the person standing next to him, the guy still can't figure out why she did it. Even a small gift looked more like a gesture of attention, and that couldn't help but please him. Hiding his eyes, embarrassed, the young man asked again if it was true that it was bought for him, because he needed confirmation once again, even if it was already obvious. Since the girl was not. Hammy, adjusting her hair, asks him, a little confused, if everything is to his liking, because such questions lead to a completely different idea. It is normal for people not to like. The boy protested, saying that he would never say such a thing. He really liked the gift. In gratitude for the literacy lessons and the books he gave her, after the girl bowing his head, once again looking at the cute figure, the boy did not count on a gift, because he believed that he had not done anything special. And even if he had, it still would not have changed his opinion much. Hammy, with eyes like two large plates, looked at her interlocutor like a puppy, trying to figure out his exact point of view. It was quite difficult, but there was nothing after. Cassian's face wrinkled and his eyes closed. It seemed as if he was in great pain. Although this was not true, the concerned person began to ask what had happened and why he was so upset, changing his facial expression so as not to frighten the maid. The red-haired man, still unable to look straight, spoke words of gratitude. And this is the pure truth, because he is a Hammy thought about something. If she had known earlier that he would like it so much, she would have thought about it a long time ago, right after the first lesson. She was not sure what she could give, but if she wanted, she could always find something suitable. Not paying attention to the obvious confusion of his interlocutor, the young Viscount decided to do more important things. It was worth deciding where to put the gift. One of the tables where lessons were usually held is definitely not suitable. One day, the figurine might accidentally be pushed to the floor, and then the boy will never forgive himself. Suffering from youthful maximalism, the young man suddenly says that perhaps one of the best ideas is to change the old interior to a new one, and then things will immediately become much easier for everyone. The boy really liked the tiger, and it was worth giving gifts. The reaction was simply impeccable. Distracted from contemplating such a cute picture, the girl noticed that the lesson was about to start, and therefore they should hurry. Leaving the guy all alone in the room so that he could finally figure out where to place his gift, Hammy opens the doors to the hallway and hurriedly leaves. She has one thing that cannot be postponed. In her room, the maid wonders if these things are enough, or if she should wait a few more days and make even more copies during this time. The question seems almost impossible to solve. Beautiful baby clothes are lying on the bed. The multicolored colors are very captivating, making it clear that the baby will become the most fashionable after birth. It was worth finding a bag to pack all this heap, and here is joy. It was right at hand, without taking time to search. Accessories are inside, and deft hands tie a tight knot for safe transport. The only downside is that the wrapped gift turned out to be too heavy. Even without lifting anything, the girl already understands that it will be quite difficult to bring it to the room she needs. The door to the office opens quietly. Voices can be heard from the room, discussing another book or assignment for the next lesson. It seems that the lesson is in full swing, but it is already coming to an end. The professor, holding a textbook in his hands, talks about a state that took 5 years for the previous ruler to declare the independence of the first academy and palace. The red-haired man listened attentively and followed the text. Both men, noticing the maid standing there, ask her to come in and close the door. I think she should come in and sit down so that after the lesson there will be an opportunity. The girl is still standing in the middle of the room, rooted to the spot. There are 2 possible scenarios in her head. Each of them is not bad, but the one in which she should wait until the end. Walking further and sitting down, Hammy continued to listen to the topic of the story. She was always interested in reading, but even more interested in listening to Professor Blake's stories. As it turned out, the high-status aristocrats did not want a division of influence and therefore protested. For future generations, the decision turned out to be correct and was appreciated. According to the teacher, if it weren't for the previous ruler, the chain of transmission of magic traditions that goes from generation to generation could have been interrupted. And that would have been in the divine land where they live. Only a few people have life-giving, enchanting magic. Only a few people can use it to their advantage, but on the other hand, the areas of magic are diverse. Magic is a substance that cannot be touched, but can be obtained. There are over 500 types, and unfortunately, not all of them are as safe as we would like. There are not many mages left, and over time, a crisis will form in the rare areas of magic. This could have led to extinction, but fortunately, the previous ruler decided. Today, the ideology has changed, but the construction still carries great significance. Any nose of any curious fortune teller can reach the magicians, but not. The girl recalls how a young man who came for groceries told her to contact him through the palace if anything happened. Surely this is not the kind of place that can be found based on interest. Finishing his fascinating story, the blonde turns to the young gentleman, talking about his manners. They have become much better, which Cassian snorts, closing his eyes and turning his head away, saying that they had always been like this. But that was not true. The boy had shown his erudition, and expecting to hear anything but that, the young man's eyes widened. It was to his advantage, but he still didn't. The girl is filled with pride for Cassian. She believes that her baby is the best, and no one can change that. He manages to do what he is capable of, even if it takes. Deciding not to show how worried he was and not to react even worse than before, the young man relaxed. He was about to leave too, and the fact that they had finished early would help a lot in that case. Smiling, the professor asks if he hasn't overworked himself. It was clearly not sarcasm, but just ordinary concern, so the boy decides to show his capabilities. He hasn't overworked himself, but on the contrary, he realized that everything was too easy, that it even became boring. The blonde decided not to comment on what was happening and simply said that he would take note. Starting from the next lesson, the teacher would try to let the young Viscount go earlier, because in a few days they would begin studying. The best suggestion is that this lesson can be celebrated, because it went quite successfully and easily. Turning his head towards the maid sitting next to him, Blake asks her opinion about. The girl happily agrees. Why not celebrate such an event if there is good company and the mood to do something? The next moment, Hammy remembers about her things and says that she has prepared the necessary clothes, as well as a new portion of the drink. It was quite nice of her, and so the professor smiles a little shyly and thanks her friend. The red-haired man, hearing these conversations, was quite taken aback. He did not understand what the joke was, and why they were communicating so kindly after the girl gave something. Mr. Blake still didn't want to stop. Like last time, he says that he can't accept such a gift without something in return. The only question is what exactly the heroine would like to receive. The brunette remembers the book again. The token of gratitude that was given to her a few days ago is quite enough for her. It is impossible to forget something like that, or want to holding the bundle on his lap, the man still resists, but this time he offers to invite her home for dinner. According to him, for several weeks now, he has wanted to treat Hammy to something as a token of gratitude. The young Viscount's face fell in horror. Food and an invitation to his home sounded rather strange. It no longer resembled a friendly relationship, even if they still considered themselves friends despite the age difference. In simple words, it was an invitation to a date. The young man could not believe how this had happened, because just recently it seemed that nothing could happen between them. And now, deciding to stop all this and destroy the idyll, Cassian protests. The word no sounded like a bolt from the blue. Those in the room were distracted from the conversation and asked. The young man frowned, making his intentions known. Hammy is a servant of the Winston family. Therefore, she cannot do anything without consent. My consent. Displeasure is heard in every note. The interlocutors are still sitting in complete silence, unable to say anything. It is easier to give the young man what he wants and let him finish his angry tirade. If the girl goes, then the young master will. A smile of resignation appears on Mr. Blake's good-natured face. He agrees to the terms, saying that Cassian is also allowed to come to dinner. When he comes to the professor's house, he will definitely be able to meet the family. Frowning, the young gentleman is not thrilled about the idea of meeting the family. He only has enough strength to ask again if it will really be like this. There is no other way out, since the man invited Hammy initially to introduce her to his family. And in the end, refusal is not accepted. Everyone wants to get to dinner. They will be ready to do what they are told. Doubt creeps into the boy's little head. Blake said that this is his family, which means that these are his parents. It sounds rather strange, because usually you meet your relatives only in one case. A cold horror grips her insides. It's impossible, but what if in the future Hammy becomes a daughter-in-law and then everything is over, even though she is still very young? The blonde had long since switched back to his interlocutor, asking about the exact date. The best solution was to see him tomorrow at lunch. Agreeing to such conditions, the carriage from the Winston estate with a beautiful horse drives down the street. The moment when the boy learns the whole truth and kicks the blanket even closer, predetermining. A sad look looks somewhere out the window. He asked for this dinner himself, but thinking about everything that is happening, he clearly does not want anything bad to happen. His head turns towards the person sitting opposite. The beautiful brunette is also looking out the window. I don't think there's anything too interesting there, but perhaps she's just uncomfortable being alone with the young gentleman, with nothing to talk about. A strange thought suddenly came to mind. Looking at the heroine for more than 1 minute, the young Viscount realized that she was still wearing the same dress. The next question is addressed to Ham. Last weekend, when the girl went out on errands, she wore the same outfit. It wasn't unacceptable, but it couldn't help but bother a person who cared. The window lost all its appeal, and the young lady turned her gaze to the man sitting opposite her. She honestly did not understand what the problem was, so she asked what was wrong with that. She could wear whatever she wanted, whenever she. Not knowing what to say, the young man told the lady to simply forget about this conversation. This was the best solution, but only for the time being. Come to think of it, Cassian had never seen Hammy in anything else. Always a maid uniform or this dress. All the other maids were probably the same, but he didn't want to start this conversation, not knowing at all how it could all end, but it was too late to back out. The proposal was to buy some clothes after dinner. The girl asked in surprise why she wanted that. The argument sounded quite convincing. A girl should have at least one change of clothes, And even better, 5 clothes. This is one of the most necessary, but if she needs anything else, there is no need. The beauty still didn't know how this world worked, so she assumed that wearing only maid's clothes here wasn't a good idea. Thinking over all the pros and cons, the maid agreed, remembering in time that she had recently seen a clothing store in Kabluchka. None of this was about spending as little time with the teacher as possible. However, it could work and be useful in 2 cases. The plan was to arrive and immediately move on. Of course, no one was going to stick to it,